The blood was still warm on her hands when Beatrice Harper heard the floorboard creak behind her, and she ran without thinking, her skirts catching on the splintered door frame as she fled into the dusty streets of Panamint, California. It was the summer of 1881, and the mining town was already sweltering at 7 in the morning, the sun beating down on the wooden buildings that lined the main street like broken teeth. She had only come to deliver the laundry to Mr. Peterson's boarding house, had pushed open the door to his private quarters when she heard the voices raised in anger, and then the shot that echoed through the narrow hallway like thunder in a canyon. Beatrice had frozen in the doorway, her basket of clean linens falling from her hands as she watched Vincent Caldwell, the mine foreman everyone feared, standing over Peterson's body with a smoking pistol still gripped in his massive hand. Their eyes had met for a single, terrible moment, and she saw something flicker across his face that was worse than anger or fear. It was calculation, cold and precise, and she knew in that instant that he would not let her live to tell what she had seen. Now she was running, her sensible boots pounding against the hard-packed earth, dodging between buildings and praying that the early hour meant few witnesses to her flight. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst through her ribs, and her breath came in gasping sobs that burned her throat. Behind her, she heard shouting, Caldwell's voice rising above the others, already spinning his story, already painting her as the guilty party. Who would believe a laundrywoman over the mine foreman? Who would take her word against a man who controlled the livelihoods of half the town? The answer was nobody, and she knew it with a certainty that made her legs pump harder, carrying her past the last row of buildings and out toward the scrubland that stretched endlessly toward the Panamint Mountains. She had no horse, no supplies, nothing but the clothes on her back and the knowledge that staying meant death by rope or by bullet, whichever Caldwell decided would be cleaner. Her lungs were screaming for air when she finally stumbled behind a cluster of Joshua trees, pressing her back against the rough bark and trying to quiet her breathing enough to hear if anyone was following. The morning sun was already turning brutal, and she had no hat, no water, nothing to protect her from the elements that killed as surely as any gun. Tears streaked through the dust on her cheeks, but she forced them back, forced herself to think. She could not go back. That much was certain. Caldwell had already made sure of that with whatever lies he was spreading. She needed to get far away, needed to find somewhere to hide until she could figure out how to prove her innocence, how to make someone believe that she had witnessed a murder rather than committed one. The sound of hoofbeats made her press harder against the tree, her whole body going rigid with terror. They were coming. Of course they were coming. Caldwell would not rest until she was silenced, and he had all the resources of the mine behind him, all the men who depended on him for their wages and their lives. But the horse that appeared from around the rocky outcropping was not ridden by one of Caldwell's men. The rider was alone, a tall figure in a battered hat and worn leather vest, leading a pack mule laden with supplies. He rode with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time in the saddle than on foot, and when he spotted her huddled among the trees, he reined in his mount with a gentle hand. "Madam?" His voice was low and careful, the kind of tone you used with a spooked animal. "You look like you are in some trouble." Beatrice tried to speak, but her throat was too dry, too tight with fear and exhaustion. She could only stare up at him, taking in the strong line of his jaw beneath several days of stubble, the blue eyes that watched her with concern rather than threat, the sun-darkened skin of someone who worked outdoors for a living. He dismounted slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and unthreatening. "My name is Wade Dalton. I have a ranch about 10 miles north of here. Are you hurt?" She found her voice finally, though it came out as little more than a rasp. "They are going to kill me. They think I murdered a man, but I did not. I saw who did it, and he is going to make sure I hang for his crime." Wade's expression did not change, but something in his eyes sharpened, became more alert. "Who thinks you murdered someone?" "Everyone in Panamint by now, I imagine. Vincent Caldwell, the mine foreman, he shot Mr. Peterson in his boarding house. I walked in right after it happened. Caldwell saw me, and I ran. He will tell everyone I did it. No one will believe me over him." Wade was quiet for a long moment, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she held his gaze, willing him to see the truth in her eyes, to understand that she was telling him the truth, even though she was a complete stranger and had no right to expect his help. "You need water," he said finally, and went to his pack mule, pulling a canteen free and bringing it to her. "Drink slowly. The heat out here will kill you faster than any posse." The water was warm and tasted of metal, but it was the most wonderful thing she had ever experienced. She forced herself to sip as he had instructed, though every instinct screamed at her to gulp it down, to drown the burning in her throat. "Thank you," she managed when she lowered the canteen. "I should not have involved you. If they find you helped me, they will come after you too." Wade took the canteen back, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. "Let me worry about that. Right now, we need to get you somewhere safe. Can you ride? I have ridden before, but not well." "It will have to do. Come on." He helped her to her feet, and she swayed slightly as the world tilted around her. His hand was steady on her elbow, warm and solid, and she found herself leaning into that strength more than she should have. He lifted her onto his horse with an ease that spoke of considerable strength, then swung up behind her, his arms coming around her to take the reins. She stiffened at the intimacy of it, but he clicked his tongue and urged the horse forward, keeping his body carefully positioned so that while he steadied her, he did not press against her inappropriately. They rode in silence for what felt like hours, though the sun had barely climbed higher in the sky. Wade kept them off any obvious trails, picking his way through the scrubland with the confidence of someone who knew every rock and gully in this harsh landscape. The pack mule followed behind, placid and unconcerned with the drama unfolding around it. "Why are you helping me?" Beatrice asked finally, her voice barely audible over the creak of leather and the soft footfalls of the horse. "You do not know me. You have no reason to believe I am telling the truth." She felt rather than saw him shrug behind her. "I know Vincent Caldwell's reputation. He has been suspected of more than one shady deal at that mine, but no one has ever been able to prove anything. He has the money and the influence to make problems disappear. And I know that you are terrified, and that terror is real. If you had actually killed someone, you would be running blind, panicked. But you are thinking, planning. That tells me you are innocent and trying to figure out how to survive long enough to prove it." His words settled something in her chest, loosened the knot of fear just enough that she could breathe properly for the first time since she had started running. Someone believed her. This stranger, this cowboy with the kind eyes and the steady hands, believed her when she had no right to expect anyone would. "What is your name?" he asked. "Beatrice Harper. I have been working as a laundress in Panamint for the past 2 years, since my father died and left me with nothing but debts. I paid those debts off 6 months ago, and I was finally starting to save a little money, to think about maybe opening my own business someday." Her voice cracked on the last words. "Now I will never be able to go back. Even if they do not hang me, I will always be the woman who might have killed a man." "We will figure this out," Wade said, and there was such certainty in his voice that she almost believed him. "First, we get you hidden somewhere safe. Then we work on clearing your name." His ranch, when they finally reached it in the blazing heat of midday, was modest but well maintained. A simple house built of wood and stone, a barn that looked sturdy enough to weather any storm, and a corral where several horses stood in the shade, flicking their tails at flies. There was a vegetable garden behind the house, carefully tended and shaded by cloth stretched between posts, and a well with a bucket hanging from a wooden frame. Wade dismounted first, then helped her down, his hands firm on her waist. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground, and he steadied her again, that same careful touch that somehow made her feel both protected and respected. "You will stay in the house," he said, leading her toward the front door. "I will tell anyone who comes around that I have not seen you. The ranch is remote enough that most people do not have cause to visit, but we need to be careful." Inside, the house was clean and surprisingly comfortable. The main room served as kitchen and living space, with a stone fireplace at one end and a simple wooden table with two chairs near the other. A door led to what she assumed was a bedroom, and another to what might have been a storage room or workshop. "You should rest," Wade said, gesturing toward the bedroom. "You have had a terrible morning, and you need to recover your strength." But Beatrice shook her head, sinking into one of the chairs instead. "I cannot rest. Every time I close my eyes, I see Mr. Peterson lying there with blood spreading across his chest. I see Caldwell's face when he realized I had witnessed what he had done. I need to do something, anything, or I will go mad." Wade studied her for a moment, then moved to the stove, stirring up the coals and setting a pot of coffee to heat. "Then we will talk about what comes next. Do you know why Caldwell killed Peterson?" "No. I only heard them arguing before the shot. Something about accounts, about money that was supposed to be paid. Mr. Peterson ran the boarding house, but he also did bookkeeping for some of the local businesses. Maybe he found something in Caldwell's accounts, something that would have gotten the foreman in trouble. That would make sense." Wade poured coffee into 2 tin cups, setting one in front of her. "Caldwell has been living well beyond what a mine foreman should be able to afford. Big house, expensive horses, always has money for cards and whiskey. People have talked, but talk is cheap when no one can prove anything. So what do we do? How do we prove that I am telling the truth when it is my word against his, and he has already convinced everyone that I am the killer?" Wade was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee as if the answer might be written in the dark liquid. Finally, he looked up, meeting her eyes across the table. "We need evidence. Something that proves Caldwell had a reason to kill Peterson, something that proves he was there at the time of the murder, and we need to keep you alive long enough to present that evidence to someone who matters." "Who would that be?" "The sheriff in Panamint works for the mine owners just like everyone else. He will not go against Caldwell." "No, but the federal marshal might. There is one who rides circuit through this territory, dealing with crimes that cross jurisdictional lines or involve significant theft. If we can prove that Caldwell has been embezzling from the mine, that would bring the marshal in. And if we can prove he killed Peterson to cover up that embezzlement, well, that is murder in the commission of a federal crime." It was a thin hope, but it was hope nonetheless, and Beatrice clung to it like a drowning woman clings to driftwood. "How long before the marshal comes through again?" "Usually about once a month. He was here 2 weeks ago, so we have another 2 weeks. Maybe a bit more." 2 weeks. 2 weeks of hiding, of waiting, of living with the knowledge that at any moment someone might discover her presence and bring Caldwell's wrath down on both of them. 2 weeks of being trapped in this remote ranch with a man she did not know, trusting him with her life because she had no other choice. Wade seemed to read her thoughts in her expression. "I know this is not ideal. I know you have no reason to trust me beyond what I have shown you today. But I give you my word, Miss Harper, that I will do everything in my power to keep you safe and to help you clear your name. You have my word as a man and as a Christian that I will not take advantage of your situation or compromise your reputation more than it already has been." The formality of his speech, the old-fashioned courtesy of it, made something in her chest tighten with an emotion she could not quite name. She had been on her own for so long, fighting to survive in a world that had little use for unmarried women with no family and no fortune. She had grown hard out of necessity, had learned to expect the worst from people because that was usually what they delivered. But there was something in Wade Dalton's eyes that made her want to believe him, want to trust that not everyone in this harsh land was out to use her or hurt her. "Thank you," she said softly. "I do not know how I will ever repay you for this kindness." "You do not need to repay anything. What kind of man would I be if I left a woman to die in the desert, guilty or innocent?" He finished his coffee and stood. "I need to tend to the animals and make sure everything looks normal. You should eat something and then rest, whether you think you can or not. Tonight, when it is dark, I will ride back toward town and see what I can learn about the situation, about what Caldwell is telling people, and whether there is a posse being organized. The thought of him leaving, even for a few hours, sent a spike of fear through her, but she nodded, understanding the necessity of it. They needed information if they were going to have any chance of succeeding. After he left, she forced herself to eat some of the bread and cheese he had laid out for her, washing it down with more coffee. Then, despite her earlier protests, she found herself swaying with exhaustion, her body demanding rest after the trauma and exertion of the morning. She made her way to the bedroom, finding it as simply furnished as the rest of the house. A bed with a sturdy frame and what looked like a comfortable mattress, a chest of drawers, a small table with a washing basin. Everything was clean and well maintained, speaking to the character of the man who lived here. She removed her boots and lay down on top of the covers, not wanting to presume too much by actually getting into the bed. But the moment her head touched the pillow, exhaustion crashed over her like a wave, and she was asleep before she could think about anything else. She woke to darkness and the sound of voices outside. Panic surged through her, and she sat up so fast that the room spun around her. But then she recognized Wade's voice, calm and steady, talking to someone else. She crept to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. Two men on horseback were sitting in front of the house, and Wade stood near them, one hand resting casually on his hip, the other holding a lantern. The light cast strange shadows across all their faces, making it hard to read expressions. "I am telling you, I have not seen any woman out this way," Wade was saying. "I have been working on the northern fence line all day. Why would a woman be wandering around out here anyway? It is miles from town." "She is wanted for murder," one of the riders said. Beatrice recognized him as Tom Bradley, one of Caldwell's men from the mine. "Shot Mr. Peterson this morning in cold blood. Caldwell saw her running from the scene with blood on her hands. She is dangerous." Dangerous! Wade's tone suggested he found that hard to believe. "A laundrywoman is dangerous." "She is a murderer," Bradley insisted. "There is a reward for her capture, $500. If you see her, you get word to Caldwell immediately." $500 is a lot of money for a mine foreman to be offering out of his own pocket, Wade observed mildly. "Must be quite anxious to see justice done." The other rider, someone Beatrice did not recognize, shifted in his saddle. "We are just doing our job, Dalton, checking all the ranches and homesteads within riding distance. You sure you have not seen anyone?" "I am sure, but I will keep an eye out. If I see anything suspicious, I will let you know." The men seemed satisfied with that, or at least unwilling to push the matter further. They turned their horses and rode back the way they had come, and Wade stood watching them until the sound of hoofbeats faded into the night. Beatrice moved away from the window, her heart pounding. $500. That was more money than most people in Panamint saw in a year. Every treasure hunter and bounty seeker in the territory would be looking for her with that kind of reward on her head. Wade came inside a few minutes later, setting the lantern on the table. "Yee." His expression was grim. "You heard?" "Yes, $500. He is making very sure that I do not survive to tell my story. The story he is spreading is that you and Peterson were involved romantically, that he ended the relationship and you killed him in a jealous rage. He is telling everyone that he tried to stop you, that you threatened him with the gun before running." Beatrice felt sick. Mr. Peterson was nearly 60 years old and happily married. No one who knew either of us would believe such a story. No one who knew you, perhaps. But Caldwell has influence, and people believe what they want to believe. A story about a jealous woman is easier for most folks to accept than the idea that one of the mine's foremen is a murderer and a thief. She sank into a chair, feeling the full weight of her situation pressing down on her. "What did you learn? Is there a posse?" "Not officially. The sheriff says he is investigating, but he is not organizing a formal search. Caldwell is using his own men and the promise of reward money to get others looking. It gives him deniability if something happens to you. He can claim it was an overzealous bounty hunter, not his intention at all. Very clever of him. Wade sat across from her, his eyes serious in the lamplight. Miss Harper, I need you to understand how dangerous this situation is. Caldwell is powerful and ruthless. If he finds out I am hiding you, he will not hesitate to kill us both. Are you absolutely certain you want to go through with this? Because if you would rather, I can get you to the nearest stage station, give you enough money to get far away from here, and start over somewhere new. Beatrice looked at him, at this man who was risking everything to help her, and felt something shift inside her. She could run. She could take the out he was offering and disappear into the vast expanse of the West, find some other town where no one knew her story, live the rest of her life looking over her shoulder and wondering if today would be the day her past caught up with her. Or she could fight. She could stand her ground and prove that she was telling the truth, that Vincent Caldwell was the killer and she was an innocent witness. It would be dangerous, maybe even impossible, but the alternative was a lifetime of running, and she was so tired of running already. I want to stay, she said firmly. I want to clear my name and see Caldwell hang for what he did. Something flickered in Wade's eyes, something that might have been respect or admiration. Then we will make it happen. But we need to be smart about it. No more looking out windows during the day. No lights in any room that faces the main road. You stay in the bedroom or the root cellar if anyone comes around. We cannot afford any mistakes. I understand. They talked for hours that night, planning and strategizing, trying to figure out how they could possibly gather evidence against a man as powerful and careful as Caldwell. Wade had some contacts in town, people who owed him favors or who might be willing to share information. He would carefully reach out to them, feel out what people were saying, see if there were any weak points in Caldwell's story that they could exploit. As the night wore on, Beatrice found herself watching Wade more than she should have, noticing the way the lamplight caught in his dark blonde hair, the strong lines of his hands as he gestured while talking, the intelligence in his eyes as he worked through various scenarios. He was younger than she had first thought, probably only a few years older than her own 24 years, but he had a steadiness about him that made him seem older, more grounded. Why are you out here alone? She asked suddenly, interrupting his explanation of how they might be able to access Peterson's boarding house to search for the bookkeeping records. A ranch like this, it seems like it would be easier with family, with a wife. Wade was quiet for a moment, his expression becoming distant. I was engaged once, about 3 years ago, to a woman named Sarah from back east. She was supposed to come out here after I got the ranch established, and we were going to be married and build a life together. But when she saw what life was really like out here, how hard it was, how isolated, she changed her mind, went back east and married a banker. I got a letter 6 months later telling me all about her wedding. I am sorry. He shrugged, but she could see the old hurt in his eyes. It was for the best. If she could not handle the reality of life out here, we would not have been happy together anyway. But it made me cautious about opening my heart again. Easier to focus on the work, on building something solid and lasting. Lonely, though. Yes, he admitted. Lonely. But that is the price we pay sometimes for the lives we choose. Beatrice understood that better than he knew. She had been lonely for so long, ever since her mother died when she was 16, leaving her alone with a father who drank himself into debt and an early grave. She had learned to be independent, to rely on no one but herself, because relying on others only led to disappointment and heartbreak. But sitting here in the warm glow of the lamp, talking with this man who had saved her life and was risking his own to help her, she felt something crack in the walls she had built around herself. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The days that followed fell into a strange rhythm. Wade would rise before dawn to do his ranch work, checking on the animals and maintaining the property so that everything appeared normal. Beatrice stayed hidden inside, occupying herself with cooking and cleaning, small ways of repaying his kindness that also helped her feel less like a helpless victim. She proved to be an excellent cook, much better than Wade with his bachelor's simple meals. She made bread from scratch, turned basic ingredients into surprisingly flavorful stews, and even managed to create a passable pie from dried apples and a little precious sugar. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Wade asked one evening, savoring a mouthful of chicken and dumplings that she had somehow created from a scrawny bird and basic staples. "My mother. She believed that a woman should know how to make a home comfortable no matter the circumstances. After she died, cooking became a way of holding on to her, I suppose, remembering the good times before everything fell apart." Wade nodded, understanding in his eyes. They were learning about each other in these long, quiet days, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes, their fears. It was an intimacy born of necessity and proximity, but it felt like more than that. It felt like the slow building of something real and lasting. On the fifth day, Wade rode into town to sell some horses and gather information. He returned after dark, his expression troubled. Beatrice met him at the door, searching his face for answers. "What did you learn?" Peterson's widow tried to tell people that her husband had discovered irregularities in the mine's books, that he was planning to report them. But Caldwell has convinced most people that she is just a grieving woman looking for someone to blame besides the obvious suspect. "Me." "Yes, the story about the jealous lover has taken hold. There are even people claiming they saw you and Peterson together in ways that seemed inappropriate, though I am certain those witnesses are being paid by Caldwell." Beatrice felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "So we are no closer to proving the truth." "Actually, we might be." Wade pulled a leather-bound book from inside his jacket. "This is Peterson's personal journal. His widow gave it to me. She remembered that you used to bring her laundry sometimes, that you were always kind to her. She believed you when I told her you were innocent." Beatrice took the journal with trembling hands, opening it to reveal pages of neat handwriting, columns of numbers, detailed notes about various business transactions. This could be everything we need. They spent the rest of the night going through the journal, and what they found was damning. Peterson had been meticulous in documenting his suspicions about Caldwell's activities. The foreman had been skimming from the mine's accounts for years, small amounts at first, then growing bolder as he got away with it. He had been falsifying equipment purchases, pocketing the difference, creating ghost workers on the payroll, and collecting their wages. The total amount was staggering, easily over $10,000. It was more than enough to hang a man, or at least send him to prison for the rest of his life. It was exactly the kind of motive that explained why Caldwell had killed Peterson and why he was so desperate to make sure Beatrice never had a chance to testify about what she had witnessed. "This is it," Wade said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is the evidence we need. We just need to get it to the marshal. When does he come through again?" "Could be any day now. He is not always on schedule, but it has been close to a month since his last visit. I will ride to the mining office tomorrow and ask when he is expected. It will not seem suspicious, just a rancher wanting to file a complaint about cattle rustling or something similar." But the next morning brought unexpected trouble. Beatrice was in the root cellar, hiding as she did whenever Wade went out during daylight, when she heard the sound of multiple horses approaching. She pressed herself into the darkest corner, barely breathing, listening to the muffled voices above. "I'm telling you, Dalton, someone saw smoke from your chimney at odd hours, saw lamplight in windows late at night. You living alone out here, it does not add up." That was Caldwell's voice, smooth and dangerous. Beatrice felt ice water replace the blood in her veins. A man cannot cook his dinner without being suspected of harboring criminals? Wade's voice was calm, almost amused. "I am sorry my housekeeping schedule does not meet your standards, Caldwell. Do not play games with me. If you are hiding that woman, you are an accessory to murder. That is a hanging offense." "Then I guess it is a good thing I am not hiding anyone. You are welcome to search the house if you like. Nothing to hide." There was a long pause, and Beatrice could imagine Caldwell weighing his options, trying to decide if he had enough justification to push the matter. Finally, She heard the heavy tread of boots on the wooden floor above, and she knew he had called Wade's bluff. She held her breath as the footsteps moved through the house, doors opening and closing, furniture being moved. At one point, someone walked directly over the root cellar, and she could see slivers of light through the gaps in the floorboards. But the entrance to the cellar was hidden behind a shelf in the pantry, and apparently Caldwell's men did not search thoroughly enough to find it. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the footsteps retreated. She heard Caldwell's voice again, closer to the door. "If I find out you are lying to me, Dalton, you will regret it. That woman is a murderer, and anyone who helps her is just as guilty in the eyes of the law." "Then I suppose it is fortunate that I am telling the truth. Now, if you are done tearing apart my home, I have work to do." The horses rode away, and Beatrice waited in the darkness of the root cellar until she heard Wade's voice calling softly that it was safe. She emerged on shaking legs, finding him standing in the destroyed remains of his tidy home. Drawers had been pulled out and emptied, mattresses overturned, shelves cleared. It would take hours to put everything back in order. "I am so sorry," she whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "This is all my fault. You have lost so much because of me." Wade crossed to her in 2 long strides, taking her by the shoulders and looking into her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "None of this is your fault. You did nothing wrong except be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Caldwell is the villain here, not you. Do not ever apologize for his crimes." She wanted to believe him, wanted to accept the absolution he was offering. But the guilt was a heavy weight in her chest, made heavier by the growing realization that she had come to care for this man far more than was wise or appropriate given their circumstances. They spent the afternoon setting the house back in order, working side by side in a comfortable silence that spoke of growing familiarity. Beatrice found herself acutely aware of Wade's presence, of the way his shoulder brushed hers when they both reached for the same overturned chair, the warmth of his hand when he passed her items to put away. That evening, as they sat at the table eating a simple meal of beans and cornbread, Wade reached across and took her hand. The gesture was so unexpected that she froze, staring at their joined fingers as if she had never seen such a thing before. "Beatrice," he said softly, using her first name for the first time, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you say anything." Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain he must be able to hear it. "All right. I know this is not the right time, and I know we have only known each other for a few days. But I have to say this because tomorrow is not promised to anyone, especially not in our current situation. I am falling in love with you. Maybe I already have fallen. I am not sure. All I know is that when I look at you, I see someone brave and strong and good, someone who has survived terrible things and remained kind despite it all, someone I want to spend my life getting to know better." Beatrice felt tears welling up again, but these were different from the tears of fear and frustration she had been shedding. These were tears of joy and wonder and a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, something good could come from this nightmare. "I feel it too," she whispered. "And it terrifies me because I have no right to feel anything except gratitude for what you are doing for me. But it is more than gratitude. So much more. When I am with you, I feel safe for the first time in longer than I can remember. I feel like maybe I could have the kind of life I used to dream about before everything went wrong." Wade stood, pulling her to her feet, and for a moment she thought he was going to kiss her, but instead he just held her, wrapping his arms around her and tucking her head beneath his chin. She could hear his heartbeat, strong and steady, and she let herself lean into his strength, let herself believe for just a moment that everything might actually work out. "We are going to get through this," he murmured into her hair. "We are going to clear your name, and then we are going to build a life together. I promise you that." She wanted to believe him. She wanted it so desperately that it ached. But she also knew how dangerous their situation was, how slim their chances of success actually were. Caldwell was powerful and ruthless, and they were just two people with a journal full of accusations and no authority to do anything about them. The next morning, Wade left early to ride to the mining office and check on the marshal's schedule. Beatrice waited anxiously, doing her best to stay busy with various household tasks, but finding it nearly impossible to focus. Every sound made her jump. Every moment that passed felt like an eternity. When Wade finally returned, it was late afternoon, and his expression was a mixture of relief and concern. The marshal is expected tomorrow. He sent word ahead that he would be arriving to investigate some complaints about mine safety. Peterson's widow must have gotten a message to him somehow. That is good news, right? We can give him the journal. I can tell him what I saw. Caldwell will finally face justice. It is good news, but it also means tonight is the most dangerous time. If Caldwell finds out the marshal is coming to investigate, he may decide to cut his losses and run, but before he does, he will want to make sure all the evidence against him is destroyed. You mean me? Yes, he will come after you with everything he has. We need to be ready. They spent the evening preparing. Wade loaded his rifle and his pistol, checked and rechecked all the ammunition. He moved the horses to the barn and secured the doors, made sure all the windows in the house had their shutters closed and latched. Beatrice helped where she could, her hands surprisingly steady, despite the fear coursing through her veins. As darkness fell, they sat together at the table, the lamp turned low, listening to the night sounds outside. Coyotes howled in the distance, and the wind picked up, whistling through the eaves of the house. "Tell me about your dreams," Wade said suddenly, his voice quiet in the darkness. "What do you want for your future after all of this is over?" Beatrice thought about it, letting herself imagine a world where she was free, where her name was cleared, where she could actually have the things she wanted instead of just surviving day to day. "I want a home," she said finally. "A real home, not just a room in a boarding house or someone else's space. I want a place where I belong, where I can plant a garden and watch it grow, where I can hang curtains in the windows and know they will still be there next year. I want a family, children, a husband who comes home to me at the end of the day and is glad to be there. Simple things, maybe, but they are what I have always wanted." Wade reached over and took her hand again, threading his fingers through hers. "That does not sound simple to me. That sounds perfect. And I want to give you all of those things, if you will let me." Before she could respond, before she could tell him that yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes, she wanted all of that with him, they heard the sound they had been dreading. Horses, multiple horses, approaching fast. Wade was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, moving to the window. Beatrice grabbed the pistol he had left for her on the table, surprised at how natural it felt in her grip. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was young, before the drinking got bad, and apparently some skills never left you. "How many?" she asked, moving to stand beside him. 6, maybe 7. Caldwell is not taking any chances." "What do we do?" "We hold them off until dawn. The marshal is expected first thing in the morning. If we can survive the night, we win." It sounded so simple when he said it like that. Just survive. Just hold off 7 armed men for an entire night. Just stay alive long enough for help to arrive. The riders surrounded the house, torches burning bright in the darkness. Caldwell's voice rang out, magnified by the night and his own arrogance. "Dalton, send the woman out, and I will let you live. Keep her in there, and you both burn." "Your choice." Wade did not even bother to respond. He just aimed carefully through a gap in the shutters and fired a single shot that sent one of the torches spinning from a man's hand. The man cursed and dove for cover, and suddenly the night erupted in gunfire. Beatrice had been in many difficult situations in her life, but she had never been in a gunfight. The noise was deafening, the smell of gunpowder acrid and choking. She did her best to follow Wade's example, firing carefully through the gaps in the shutters whenever she had a clear target, trying to make every shot count. The house's stone construction saved them. Bullets thudded into the walls but did not penetrate, and the heavy wooden shutters held against the assault. But Caldwell's men kept up a steady barrage, and Beatrice knew they were just trying to keep them pinned down while someone worked on a way to set the house on fire. "The barn!" Wade said suddenly, his face grim. "They are going to fire the barn. If it goes up, the wind will carry embers to the house. The roof is wood. We will burn. What can we do?" "I have to get to the barn, put out any fires before they can spread. You stay here, keep them occupied. Do not let them rush the house." "Wade, no! If you go out there, they will kill you." He turned to her, and in the flickering light from the muzzle flashes and the torches outside, his face was full of determination and something deeper, something that made her heart ache. "I am not going to let you die in a fire, Beatrice Harper. I am not going to let you die at all. Trust me." He kissed her then, fierce and fast, a promise and a goodbye all at once. Then he was moving toward the back of the house, to the door that faced away from where most of the men were concentrated. Beatrice wanted to scream, wanted to beg him not to go, but she knew he was right. Their only chance was to keep the fire from spreading, so she took up position at the front window and started firing methodically, giving Wade the cover he needed to make his run to the barn. She saw him sprint across the open ground, a dark shadow against the starlit sky, and she held her breath until he made it to the barn door and disappeared inside. Then she focused all her attention on keeping Caldwell's men away from the house, away from the barn, away from the man she loved. The fight seemed to last forever, though it could not have been more than an hour. The men outside grew more cautious after two of them took wounds from Beatrice's surprisingly accurate shooting. They stopped trying to rush the house and instead fell back, regrouping for a different strategy. Wade emerged from the barn, carrying buckets of water, dousing the small fires that had been started along the barn's walls. He worked quickly and efficiently, and Beatrice provided covering fire whenever one of Caldwell's men tried to get a clear shot at him. Then, finally, blessedly, the sky began to lighten in the east. Dawn was coming, and with it, their salvation or their doom. If the marshal arrived as scheduled, they would make it. If he was delayed, if something had happened to change his plans, they would eventually run out of ammunition, or Caldwell would come up with a new strategy that they could not counter. The gunfire from outside had slowed, and Beatrice could hear voices arguing. Some of the men wanted to leave, wanted to get away before dawn brought witnesses to what they were doing. But Caldwell's voice rose above the others, harsh and commanding, ordering them to finish the job. Then, cutting through the argument, came the sound that Beatrice had been praying for. More horses, approaching fast from the direction of town, and a voice loud and authoritative, demanding that everyone drop their weapons in the name of federal law. The marshal had arrived, and he had not come alone. It seemed Peterson's widow had done more than just send word about the mine complaints. She had told the marshal everything, about her husband's suspicions, about his murder, about the witness who was being hunted. Caldwell made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation, trying to claim that he was the one upholding the law, trying to capture a dangerous murderer. But the marshal was having none of it. He had stopped at the boarding house first, had examined the scene of the crime, had found evidence that Caldwell had overlooked in his haste to frame Beatrice. The powder burns on Peterson's shirt showed that he had been shot at close range by someone standing directly in front of him, not from the doorway where Beatrice would have been. Peterson's gun was still in his desk drawer, unfired, which contradicted Caldwell's story about the victim trying to defend himself against a female attacker. And when they searched Caldwell, they found Peterson's accounting book in his saddlebag, the one with all the legitimate records that contradicted the false documents Caldwell had been submitting to the mine owners. It was over. In the growing light of dawn, Beatrice stood beside Wade and watched as the marshal placed Caldwell and his men under arrest. The foreman's face was twisted with rage and hatred, but he was smart enough not to resist when faced with the marshal's guns and deputies. "Miss Harper," the marshal said, tipping his hat to her, "I owe you an apology. You should never have been forced to hide like a criminal when you were the innocent party in all of this. If you are willing to testify about what you witnessed, I can guarantee you will be protected and your name will be cleared." "I will testify," Beatrice said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion washing over her now that the danger had passed. "I will tell the truth about everything I saw." The marshal nodded, then turned to Wade. "And you, Mr. Dalton, took a considerable risk harboring a fugitive. Lucky for you, it turned out she was not actually a fugitive, but a witness in need of protection. Otherwise, I would have to arrest you too." Wade just smiled, his arm coming around Beatrice's shoulders and pulling her close. "I never had any doubt she was telling the truth. Sometimes you just know when someone is genuine." The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings and testimonies. Beatrice told her story to the marshal, then to a judge, then to a jury. Peterson's journal was entered into evidence, along with all the other proof of Caldwell's crimes. The trial was swift, the verdict inevitable. Vincent Caldwell was found guilty of murder and embezzlement. He was sentenced to hang, and on a cool morning in September, the sentence was carried out in Panamints Town Square. Beatrice did not attend the execution. She had no desire to watch any man die, even one who had tried so hard to kill her. But Wade went, standing as witness to ensure that justice was truly done. When it was over, when Caldwell was gone and the threat that had hung over her was finally lifted, Beatrice felt like she could breathe fully for the first time in months. She was free. Her name was cleared. She could go anywhere, do anything, start the life she had always dreamed of. But there was really only one place she wanted to be, and that was beside the man who had risked everything to save her. Wade proposed to her properly on a Sunday afternoon in October, with the fall colors painting the mountains in shades of gold and red. He had no ring to offer her, just his calloused hand and his honest heart, and that was more than enough. "Beatrice Harper, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I know I am just a rancher with more calluses than money, and I cannot promise you an easy life, but I can promise to love you with everything I have, to protect you and cherish you, to build that home and that family you dreamed about. Will you marry me?" She did not even have to think about her answer. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married in November, in a small ceremony at the church in Panamint with Mrs. Peterson as a witness and a handful of friends from the surrounding ranches in attendance. Beatrice wore a simple blue dress that Mrs. Peterson had helped her sew, and Wade wore his best Sunday suit with a new string tie. They exchanged vows before God and their community, promising to love and honor each other through whatever trials life might bring. The winter that followed was cold and hard, but they barely noticed. They were too busy building their life together, learning each other's rhythms and habits, discovering the joy that came from true partnership. Wade taught Beatrice how to rope and ride properly, how to read the weather and the land, how to gentle a skittish horse with patience and kindness. Beatrice transformed the simple ranch house into a real home, adding curtains and comfort, tending her garden, and planning for the spring planting. And at night, in the privacy of their bedroom, they learned each other in more intimate ways, discovering passion and tenderness, building the foundation of a marriage that would last a lifetime. By spring, Beatrice was pregnant with their first child. She had been nervous about telling Wade, worried that he might be concerned about the dangers of childbirth or the added responsibility. But his face had lit up with such pure joy when she told him the news that all her worries evaporated. "A baby," he had breathed, his hand coming to rest gently on her still flat belly. "Our baby. I cannot believe it. We are going to be parents." Their son was born in October of 1882, a strong, healthy boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. They named him James after Wade's grandfather, and he was the light of their lives from the moment he drew his first breath. Beatrice proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving, but firm when necessary. Wade was equally devoted, working hard during the day to provide for his family, but always making time to hold his son, to sing him lullabies in his deep, rumbling voice, to walk him around the ranch, explaining everything they saw. 2 years later, they had a daughter, Emily, who had her mother's green eyes and her father's sunny disposition. Then came another boy, William, Serious and thoughtful even as an infant, their family grew, and with it the ranch prospered. Wade expanded the herd, bought more land, built additions onto the house to accommodate their growing family. Beatrice started a small business of her own, making preserves and baked goods that she sold in town. It started as a way to contribute to the family finances, but it quickly grew beyond that, becoming a point of pride and independence. She was not just Wade Dalton's wife, though she was proud to be that. She was also Beatrice Dalton, businesswoman and mother, known throughout the county for her strawberry preserves and her apple pies. The years passed in a sweet blur of hard work and harder-won joys. There were difficult times, of course. A drought that nearly broke them one year. A winter so harsh they lost half the herd to cold and hunger. There were illnesses and injuries, the inevitable heartbreaks that came with living in such an unforgiving land. But through it all, they had each other. When Wade was discouraged, Beatrice was there to remind him of how far they had come, of all they had built together. When Beatrice was exhausted from caring for young children and managing her business, Wade was there to take over, to give her time to rest, to remind her that she did not have to carry every burden alone. They had learned in those desperate days when Caldwell was hunting her what it meant to truly rely on another person, and that lesson had served them well through all the years that followed. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Wade surprised Beatrice with a gift he had been working on in secret for months. It was a rocking chair built from walnut wood and sanded until it was smooth as silk, with their initials carved into the back along with the date of their wedding. "For the front porch," he explained as she ran her fingers over the beautiful craftsmanship, "so you can sit and rock and watch the sunset after a long day. You have earned it, Beatrice. You have earned every moment of peace and happiness." She cried, of course, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift and the love behind it. But they were happy tears, tears of gratitude for the life they had built together, for the family they had created, for the love that had sustained them through 2 decades of joy and sorrow. Their children grew strong and capable, learning the values their parents lived by. James became a skilled horseman and eventually took over most of the ranch operations, allowing Wade to slow down a bit as he aged. Emily surprised everyone by showing an aptitude for business and helped expand her mother's preserve operation into a thriving regional company. William became a teacher, settling in Panamint and educating the next generation of children in the growing town. Beatrice and Wade became grandparents, then great-grandparents, their family tree spreading and growing until it seemed half the county was related to them in some way. They were respected members of the community, known for their generosity and their willingness to help neighbors in need. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, when they sat together on the porch in the rocking chairs that now numbered 2, they would talk about that long-ago summer when their lives had collided in violence and fear. "Do you ever regret it?" Beatrice asked once, her hand finding his in the growing darkness. "Risking everything to help a stranger, you could have been killed or arrested or lost everything you had built." Wade was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously as he always did. Then he squeezed her hand and turned to look at her, his blue eyes still as clear and true as they had been the day they met. "Not even for a second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Beatrice Dalton. You and our children and grandchildren and this life we have built together. If I had to go back and do it all again, face down Caldwell and his men 100 times over, I would do it without hesitation. Because you are worth it. You have always been worth it." She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart that had been her anchor for so many years. "I love you, Wade Dalton. I have loved you since that first day when you offered me water and believed my story when you had no reason to. I will love you until the day I die and beyond. And I love you, Beatrice Dalton. I loved you the moment I saw you hiding among those Joshua trees, terrified and determined all at once. I will love you through all our days and into whatever comes after." They sat together as the stars came out, as they had done 1,000 times before and would do 1,000 times again. They had survived murder and manhunts, drought and hardship, loss and grief. But more than that, they had thrived. They had built something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of tragedy. And when they finally passed, years later, within months of each other, they were laid to rest side by side in the cemetery overlooking the ranch they had loved. Their children and great grandchildren stood at their graves and told stories about the brave woman who had witnessed a murder and the brave man who had hidden her until justice could be served. But more than that, they told stories about a love that had conquered fear, about two souls who had found each other in the darkest of times and had built a light that would shine through generations. The ranch still stood, operated now by great great grandchildren who had never known their famous ancestors personally, but who carried on their legacy of hard work and integrity and love. The house had been expanded and modernized over the years, but the original bedroom where Beatrice had first hidden, where she had first allowed herself to hope for a better future, was preserved as it had been, a reminder of where it all began. And on the front porch, two rocking chairs sat side by side, worn smooth by decades of use, their carved initials still visible in the walnut wood. On warm evenings, when the sun set over the Panamint Mountains in shades of gold and crimson, you could almost imagine you saw two figures sitting there, hands clasped, watching the beauty of the world they had fought so hard to be part of. Their story became legend in Panamint, passed down through generations. The woman who had fled a murder, and the cowboy who had kept her hidden until the killer hung. But those who truly knew them, who understood the depth of their love and the strength of their partnership, knew it was so much more than that. It was a story about courage and faith, about choosing to believe in someone when everyone else had decided they were guilty. It was about building something beautiful from tragedy, about refusing to let fear and hatred win. It was about two people who had found each other against all odds and had held on through everything life threw at them. And in the end, it was a story about love, pure, true, enduring love that transformed two lonely souls into a family, a legacy, a testament to what was possible when two people faced the world together. Years after Beatrice and Wade had passed, their great-granddaughter found the journal that Beatrice had kept during those terrible, wonderful days when she had been hiding at the ranch. The entries were brief, written in stolen moments when fear still gripped her heart, but they painted a picture of a woman falling in love despite the danger, finding hope in the darkest of circumstances. One entry in particular stood out, dated just days before the marshal had arrived. It read, "I do not know what tomorrow will bring. Caldwell may find me. The marshal may not arrive in time. I may hang for a crime I did not commit. But I know this. I am no longer afraid, because I have found something worth living for, worth fighting for. Wade Dalton has given me back my life, not by hiding me, but by believing in me. And regardless of what happens, I will love him for that until my last breath." The great-granddaughter carefully preserved that journal, adding it to the collection of family heirlooms that documented the remarkable story of Beatrice and Wade Dalton. She made sure that every new generation heard the story, understood the sacrifice and courage and love that had founded their family. And the story lived on, as all great love stories do, inspiring those who heard it to be braver, to trust more, to believe that even in the darkest of times, love could light the way home. In Panamint, now a much larger and more modern town than it had been in 1881, there was a small museum dedicated to local history. In it, among displays about mining and frontier life, was a special exhibit about Beatrice and Wade Dalton. It featured Peterson's journal with its damning evidence against Caldwell, newspaper clippings from the trial, photographs of the couple taken in their later years, and the simple, beautiful rocking chair that Wade had made for their anniversary. Visitors to the museum often stood longest at that exhibit, reading the story of the murder witness and the cowboy who had protected her, looking at the photographs of their weathered, smiling faces in old age, imagining what it must have been like to live through such a dramatic and romantic time. But those who looked closely, who really paid attention, could see that the most remarkable thing about Beatrice and Wade's story was not the drama or the danger. It was the simple, profound truth visible in every photograph, every artifact, every recorded memory. They had loved each other deeply, truly, completely, and that love had been the foundation for everything else, the rock upon which they had built a life and a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. It was, in the end, the greatest adventure of all. Not the running or the hiding or the shootout under the stars, but the choosing, day after day, year after year, to love and be loved, to build something lasting, to create a home where there had been only danger and fear. And as the sun set over the Panamint Mountains, casting long shadows across the land that Beatrice and Wade had loved so well, their story continued to inspire, to encourage, to remind all who heard it that love, real love, was the greatest treasure anyone could ever find. Their grave markers stood side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, simple stone monuments engraved with their names and dates and a single line that summarized everything they had meant to each other. Together in life, together in death, together in love forever. And somewhere, in whatever realm exists beyond this one, two souls who had found each other in the most unlikely of circumstances continued their journey together, hand in hand, heart to heart, just as they had promised on that dusty day in 1881, when a terrified woman had met a kind-hearted cowboy, and both their lives had changed forever. The end.